Hello and welcome to class number 31 of the UPSC Mains Answer Writing Initiative, where we are trying to ease out the burden from your mind of how to tackle UPSC Mains questions. This is a place where we try and answer previous year questions and tell you how to do that, and also give you homework, especially based on topics in the current affairs so that you can practice, where I will be happy to give you your feedback. If you have still not joined our Telegram channel to get all these PDFs, please do that. The link for the Telegram channel is in the description of this particular video. If you have missed out on any of the earlier classes of this series, again I'm giving the link in the description of the video. Please go ahead, check that out as well. Also, if you are new here, if you have not written any answer by yourself and you don't know where to begin, this will help you out. Go to class number 1 of this entire series. In first class, we had discussed about how to write the answers, how to structure it mainly, how to write the introduction, the main body, the conclusion. So in case you have not seen that, I am giving the link of this playlist in the description of this video. The playlist is called UPSC Mains Answer Writing Initiative. Go to class number 1 and you will be able to see how to structure your answers and you will feel much better, and then you can come back here. Now let's see what is the question that we have taken up to answer today. Today we have taken up a question from 2022 GS1 paper of UPSC. It's a question from modern history. Pretty simple, straightforward question. Why did the armies of British East India Company, mostly comprising of Indian soldiers, win consistently against the more numerous and better equipped armies of the then Indian rulers? Give reasons. So the question is very straightforward and simple. It is asking you, why exactly did British armies win when their soldiers were also Indians and not the Indian armies? Now, before we begin, one point here. In history questions, when the question is about something that has already happened in the past, you can't give a way forward. You can't give a different point of view. So in history questions, these are usually written to the point. It is in other kind of questions in polity, IR, economics, environment, etc., internal security, where you can give a way forward, you can give a different point of view that the government should do this or the government can do this, so on and so forth. In history questions in GS1, there is no scope of doing that because it has already been done, it has already happened. So don't think about introducing that way forward or suggestions kind of a point. You just have to write straight to the point here. Now, why is it that the British armies won? Various reasons. First, better leadership. The military leaders were British, the soldiers were Indians, but the higher up leadership were British. They were better trained, they knew how to employ their strategies, and they were able to ensure that their people or their soldiers were fighting in as a team. Second, the soldiers that were employed by the East India Company, they were better prepared, also because of the fact that they were full-time soldiers. Now, if you look at most of the armies at that time that the rulers in Indian subcontinent used to employ, most of these were not permanent or full-time soldiers. Many of them were farmers, many of them were laborers, sculptors, etc. They were called when the king wanted them to fight, when the ruler wanted them to fight. So obviously you can't compare how they would fare against professional armies whose entire profession is to fight. So their training, the training given to the British soldiers, although they were Indians, was much better. Also, the British had one single goal. The one single goal that they had was to have economic domination of India. Indian rulers on the other hand had different goals. Some of them were fighting because the British had taken over their royalty. The British had introduced laws such as the doctrine of lapse, and they had taken over the entire princely state if the ruler did not have a son of their own. Some rulers were fighting for some other agenda. So there was not a very common front. Rather than everyone fighting together, they were actually fighting all by themselves. British had at many times better technology. They introduced different types of weapons that most of the Indian rulers did not have, most of the Indian soldiers had not used. Then there were British policies of divide and rule. Many British policies had brought Indian rulers towards their side. So there was a lack of trust amongst the Indian rulers as well. Also, the Indian rulers and their soldiers were not fighting for a national cause. Like today, you have a proper nation, the soldiers fight for their nation, there is a nationalistic feeling, there is a patriotic feeling. At that point of time, the feeling was not that you're fighting for your nation, it was more of an order, it was more forced upon you that the ruler of your state wants you to fight, so you have to fight and you don't have any other option. These were the main reasons why the British forces usually came out on top, although they also had Indian soldiers only as compared to the Indian rulers in India. Now we'll start this. In history, again the introduction will remain quite similar because the question is not specifically about one single instance. You can't write a fact, you have to write a generic kind of an intro. East India Company defeated larger armies through military and political superiority. Despite comprising of Indian sepoys, they had better tactics, discipline and leadership. So you can basically give points or one line answer here. You will explain this in the main body, that what do you mean by better tactics, what do you mean by better leadership. We will explain that in the main body. In the introduction, we have just written one line that they were better because of these things. So in the main body, we will start with the reasons behind their victory. First, as I said, they had a much more unified command. They had much better technology. British had cannons, assault rifles, much more advanced as compared to the Indian weapons that they had. They had access to European technology. They were able to import it. Now, some of the Indian armies did have a good technology or did have good state-of-the-art weapons, but not all the rulers. Only the rulers which were aware of the fact that they would require this to fight against the British, they were the only few ones that had actually invested in their military, in their army. Most Indian rulers did not invest in their military. They were happy splurging money on their own vice. That is also something that played a major role. As I said, East India Company had a single objective: to fight to control trade and economic domination. Indian rulers were fighting for their own personal agendas, and that is why there was no unified or feeling that they are fighting together. They had great external support. The leadership of Robert Clive, Warren Hastings, Cornwallis, etc. was helpful. The British East India Company was entirely backed by the British Crown. So they did not have any dearth of money. They did not have any dearth of support. Whatever they wanted was supplied to them by the Crown and by the British government. Their policies of dividing the rulers made sure that there was never a united front. Made sure that there was never a time that multiple rulers came together to fight against the British, except the First War of Independence, 1857. But again, that also was not very successful because not the entire country fought against the British. Permanent nature of the army, as I said, British army soldiers were soldiers, full-time soldiers. They were not farmers who were called into the army at the time of the war. This was the case for the Indian rulers, that they did not employ any full-time army. There was army that was called only when required. Otherwise, they were just farmers working to make their ends meet. That these are the main reasons. If you want, if you have in your mind, you can include some others as well. We'll conclude it by summarizing it. East India Company had a private army, utilized their power to impose taxes, carry out plundering of the government of India. Because of their unified approach, because of the better technology, they were able to conquer most of India and defeat most of Indian armies, although they were bigger in size. Again, in history question, there is no point of giving way forward or suggestions because this has already happened in the past. We just conclude by giving a summary point of view. And that is how we end this answer. Here is homework for you. I have taken a question, or rather made a question from a topic that is in the news: election expenditure. The question is, there is a huge expenditure gap amongst different electoral candidates in Indian elections. Some candidates spend a lot more money as compared to others. What are the significant implications of such disparities on our democratic process? In this context, suggest some effective measures that might lead to an enhanced electoral transparency in India. So the question again is about electoral expense, how some candidates spend crores and crores of rupees, although there is a limit but they still go over and above that. How does that impact a democratic system, and how can we improve the transparency? If you want me to check your answers, you can send it here to me. I'll be happy to give you feedback in a few days. Thank you so much for watching. Do join me tomorrow at 7 p.m. and continue this journey of answer writing. Bye bye. Jai Hind.